Hey everybody, good afternoon. It's end of March, March 31st, 2026. So we are almost to April, and that's no joke. Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the people who've been coming out to all of my live streams recently. There's been a lot of them, and it won't be like that every day in the same sense of the interviews, but I had 3 back to back yesterday, and I appreciate so much all the people that tried to show up or to check them out later and comment on them. If anyone didn't see them, they were really amazing. I thought it was great to see Seth Andrews, of course, Mariah, Ricky Johnson later. Mariah was a little different in that she still identifies as a Christian, but we had a great conversation, very respectful, and a lot of good insights, I thought. Seth Andrews, of course, just blew me away as always. And Ricky Johnson is a long-term friend of the channel. He and his son, Austin, had done an interview a long time ago. So it was good to have Ricky back and sort of go through some of his details again. And I just want to say thank you so much for those of you who've been trying your best to encourage me in this. I am doing my best to show up big every day and to be seeing if there's any way that I can stay at this full time. If anyone can support me, I urgently, desperately need your support. All the ways to do so are beneath this video. So please consider being either a YouTube member or a Patreon patron, however that word should be said, or there's other ways with PayPal and all that, and GoFundMe. But whatever way is best for you, I urgently need help to keep doing this, and I would really appreciate it. And today, what we're going to talk about is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I'm going to be going at this topic a little bit differently today, but I think it's also going to be very much on our radar for a while in different ways, because I think it's critical to talk about this stuff. But we're looking in some ways at what you might call shadow work, not in any kind of official sense. Of course, I'm not a therapist. And certainly those of you that feel like you need a therapist, I strongly encourage you to go that route. But just in terms of talking through some of the ways that we need to get the language, and not even just the language, even just the emotions in line to say, let's do this. Some of these topics are a little bit heavier. This one's sort of going to be somewhere in the middle. There'll be some light moments, but I think it's important to take a step back, take a deep breath, and just kind of say, what's the path forward from here? Because deconstruction and deconversion are the opening of the doors for us to deconstruct and reconstruct ourselves and our lives, and to really get to a point where we're addressing some of the harder questions in life. But I just want to start, and I'm going to probably be, at times a little bit free with my poetic expressions. I do like to make sure that we're not being too serious. I think sometimes poetry helps us to figure out some better ways to say stuff. Not always, but a lot of the times. But there are seasons, I think, in my life when I feel like I am almost living my life in an empty house that's full of echoes. Do you ever feel that way? Where I remember the footsteps and the slammed doors. I remember all the tears. I remember all the laughter. I remember the parties. I remember going to bed. I remember the prayer times. And a lot of things that I would look back on now and say there are a lot of prayers that went unanswered. And again, using a lot of metaphors here today, but there's a lot of wallpaper or paint on the walls that has a lot of fingerprints that tell a story. They really do tell a story. And it almost feels at times like you're in that house hearing the old footsteps, and you're hearing the younger you crying from behind, the bedroom door or something. And you weren't perhaps weak when these events happened. It was just something traumatized you, and now you have to deal with it in one way or another. A lot of times when we were kids, we would have to face it with silence, buck up, and just deal with it. But in many ways, we were shrinking inside. A lot of us were shrinking. And I think at the same time of not just looking backwards to where I've been, but also to thinking of the future me, that like, what is Tim going to be like? Hopefully I live for a while, but what is it going to be like in the future when, perhaps I think of myself sitting on a porch in the rain, drinking a cup of tea or coffee, sort of just drenched in the realities of even more life has passed. And what is my life like? What has it been like? And I want to look at that future me from today, and I want to have hopeful eyes. and say, change is possible. And, despite all the storms of the past and the present, change is possible. There are better days ahead. But you sort of stand, today, right here, right now in your present, in that hallway. You sort of have your hands on the wall, touching the old wallpaper, maybe overwhelmed with where you've been, where your journey's taken you, sort of wondering, how can this have all happened to me? How could one person have this much grief, this much buried deep inside? So much, like it's like you have an unborn life inside of your heart and in your brain. It's just, you ask yourself, how can one heart have that much pain? That many winters. It's like you've had so many winters, and when do you get to spring? Your nervous system has so much history in it. And again, it feels at times not just like you can even deal with the issues. You're just asking, how can one person have this much to process? And I think that's what's behind a lot of our pain is it just seems so unbelievable. How can that much bad have happened? And yet there's no real progress. And that's why I think a lot of our conversations, both here, but also more, I'm thinking like your self-talk, your self-conversations can occur sort of again in the hallway, in the corridor between the you that survived the past and the you that's here currently, and the you that in the future is going to be hopefully in a much better spot, who you're becoming. But you're sort of in that middle ground, and you're sort of trembling, like, where do I go from here? And can I have some sense that it's going to get better? And I think a lot of us are realizing healing is not just moving on. That's what I think so many of us get tripped up on. It's just, move on from it. That's not how you heal. There's an ache. There's an ache that you have to deal with, but there's also an ache in realizing simply that this is going to be a long journey. It's much more intimate and honest and costly to go through this process. And you're a human, and the human part of this journey, it's not easy. It's not clean. Sometimes it's very dirty. And I think a lot of us think that if we're sort of getting to a place of forgetting the past, or we're numb to it, that we're okay. Like there's some kind of peace that's arrived. And we're not trying to do that. We're not trying to say, I feel numb, so therefore I'm at peace, therefore I'm okay. We want to, in a sense, turn our vision toward the version of ourselves that's the past, that's sort of stranded in time, and say, I don't want to leave you there. Young Tim, young Susanna, whoever, young Noel, young Stephen, I don't want to leave you there in the past. I want to face you, and bring you to the future with hope. And we can't obviously actually do that. We can't talk to ourselves through time, and we can't bring our old selves future in time. But psychologically, we can just say, I'm not going to leave you there. I'm not leaving you behind. And in a sense, I think, again, a lot of this is poetic and metaphorical in my mind as to how we address these, but sometimes it's almost about trying to find that person, the younger person that's you, and just kneel down beside them, not in prayer, but kneel down in tears, kneel down with the ache, and just sit in it, sit in the ache for a while, sit in the pain, and to realize you were, in a sense, as a young child, in a very proverbially cold room, in a cold house, and to bring some warmth, to bring some hot tea, to bring warmth to this equation, to your old self. And it's like you're saying to your old self, at long last, I'm here. I'm sorry I've been away for so long. I know you're still here. I know you've been carrying way too much for far too long. I'm here now, and I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay as long as it takes. And I think so much of our suffering comes from that internal civil war, where we've got this desire to move on, but there's also this almost this campaign that we have in this civil war of, like, it's me versus my old self versus the people that hurt my old self, the people that are hurting me now, the new self that I want to get to. We're so divided. We're so caught up. We're shredded. And we're so used to also looking at our old self and maybe our current self, but we're looking at our old self and saying, there are parts of you that for years in your own mind were so unacceptable. So even now we might look back and say, there's part of you, little child me, that's acceptable and unacceptable. And to get past that and to start to heal those wounds of attacking ourselves for so long. Were you worthy? Were you unworthy? Were you clean or were you stained? Were you okay, or did you have to wear a mask? Or were you wounded? And, one part of us is 5 years old. One part of us is 10 or 12 years old, still trying to be good enough, still trying to find some kind of safety, still trying to figure out why the bad things happen, still trying to protect ourselves or predict the danger. And then when it happens, to try to respond to it appropriately and keep ourselves safe from that point forward. Part of us as little kids was, scanning the room for what are the adults in this room going to be like? How are they going to speak to me today? Are they in good moods? Sometimes it was as horrifying as that. But, are people going to find me easy to love or hard to love today? And this, there's a whole appeasement that was happening in our minds, like a whole choreographed performance that we went through over and over every day. And it's like, if you want to survive, you will learn to dance, and it's not going to have any kind of ending. It's just dance and dance and dance. And if you dance right, you'll be okay. If you dance wrong, you'll get a beating. So figure out a way to dance better. And that's where so many of us are living even now. And this is where some of the shadow work is going to begin, looking back and saying, where have I been all this time? Part of us, I think, too, feels wiser because we've obviously been through a lot. We've been through perhaps deconversion. We're more mature. We're furious at the years that we wasted in this stuff. We're angry about the way that we were mistreated, and it's a good anger. It's a clean anger. It's a clarifying anger. You realize how much time you lost. Again, you realize how much it was called a good thing. But you're tired of how you were hurt. You're tired of how you were abused. You're tired of how you disappeared and vanished, and all in the name of God. And I think there's we think of a future self we imagine that somehow when we get older, it'll be an older version of us that takes deeper breaths and goes slower, not because of age, but just because we're thinking deeper. We're choosing better. We're choosing wiser. We have better thoughts. We've grieved well. We're certainly not doing any more betrayal of ourselves like we did when we were kids, and perhaps still doing now. And we want that person. And it's like you have to figure out how those people can talk to each other. Your current self with your old self and your new self. A lot of us have arguably been pleading with ourselves for some kind of resolution for these things for a very long time. Figuring out how to rest, not knowing really what to do. How do you move forward in some of these pain and some of the fractures that have occurred, and the pain that's just so overwhelming? It's almost like you're also trying to figure out what language to even speak. And that's why sometimes when we talk to people like Andrew Jaskio the other day, therapists and people that can help us, we get the language, but it's almost like there's a fluency that we've lost, or it's hard to understand from when we were kids. And even though we're not necessarily speaking it yet, having people that can give us the words helps us to at least start the conversation. And you realize you've left yourself behind. You've left yourself in a very dark, cold room shaking when you were just a little kid. You had a self that was taken over by Jesus, by the Bible, by Christianity, by the church. Your fear took over. Your fear was one of your major instincts, sort of part of your language in a sense. Everything was Christian at that point. Everything was about your hope in Jesus. And while that seemed on the surface perhaps a good thing, the inner you, the real you, the little you, the child you, basically went to a dark corner and put your nose against the wall, and it's been waiting there ever since, saying, I hope at some point I can take my nose off the wall. A lot of us are living there, whether we realize it or not. This is not fluff. This is not touchy-feely stuff. This is getting down to some of the nitty-gritty of who are you, and where did the real you stop talking and interacting with real life? I think in these times when we say to ourselves, we need to figure out the compass. Where's the compass from this point forward? How do I reorient myself? I need to get slowly back to true north. And it's like, it's the moment that your heart and your mind say, yeah, I see the way. Let's keep walking on that way. Let's pick the direction that is truly, truly hopeful from this point forward. And some of it's going to come in small little ways, the things that you do every day. You choose to respect yourself. You choose to have boundaries. You choose to speak up when you should. You choose to choose self-care. But your younger you that you're trying to heal from, that child has learned to smile to get approval, to jump through hoops to get approval. It's amazing to think about little children can literally calm adults down. They can calm the whole room. They can keep the peace because they know how to play the game. And we as children, in many ways, are there standing with our nose on the wall, having just tried to calm the room, and it blew up in our faces. And now we've got to figure out, where do you go? Where do you go from here? And so many emotions have been piling up in the meantime. Our rage, our needs, our identity, our griefs, our doubts, our tenderness, our terrors, our joys, even at this point, of course, as adults, our sexuality, all these hungers and all these needs, and all the sentences that we have never said that we needed to, and we have sort of forgotten what to say or how to say it, all the parts of our lives that are unlived. And we're tired of living without the delight that we think we should have lived with, the dancing, the spirit dancing inside of our brains, and our our body literally dancing in real life. If you bury these things, they don't go away. They just sit there and they wait. They're indirectly influencing you. They're sort of on the other side of the doors of your psyche. They travel with you in a sense throughout your life. They're in disguise, I would argue, but it's sort of like the lava picture. The explosion of the lava when it finally the mountain has an eruption. But the hot lava doesn't get hot at the moment of the eruption. The hot lava has been there boiling for a long time, and that's I think in many ways what's going on with us. And our conscious self gets so tired. It's like we're sitting there watching this, guarding it almost. We're watching our old self, hoping for the new self, hoping for better days ahead, hoping for healing, hoping just to calm it down for today and figure out how to be safe in our own skin, or in our own minds. And the way that mental guard does it often is through some very unhealthy ways, but it's part of survival. We project, we sabotage, we panic, we get numb, we feel contempt. We go through these stages of compulsions and strange addictions or attractions and overreactions, and we over-explain, or we just give up and walk away, and we cry. Certainly, we flinch, which we've been talking about that a few times in the last week. We find ourselves saying, "I condemn something, but in a sense, I also want it. I crave it. I want to be free, but I'm also afraid of that freedom and what it means." And that all that stuff does not vanish if you ignore it. It's still there, and it's patiently waiting for a chance to talk with you. A lot of us are surviving in fragments of time, fragments of thought, fragments of emotions, fragments of ourselves, and we are secretly aching for wholeness. I mean, we really are. We're aching for wholeness. We're aching for that conversation with ourselves. And so I think we need to talk about these things. We need to talk about the fear of what we've been through and how to face it. The fear of if I go down this road, it's going to actually hurt. It's going to hurt a ton. And all the shame that we went through, maybe if I deal with the shame, it's going to hurt. I'd like to invite myself and you to sort of an inner reunion with the child version of you. The child version of you that's sitting there saying, we have a lot to talk about. And we need to, in a sense, lower our emotional weapons against all the pain and all the ways that we say, if I deal with that, it's going to hurt too much, so I'll just move on. Lower it. Stop feeling like you're in a courtroom where everything's going to condemn you. And let that younger, hidden version of you walk away from the wall and sit down next to yourself. You're going to tremble. You're going to hurt. But if you don't do this, you're not going to be integrated. There's going to be a part of you that's not part of who you are in a healthy sense. We want to go back in time and gather what was scattered, gather what was broken, gather the broken pieces, the shattered glass. We want to mend up these torn pieces of who we were. And this is slow, critical work of becoming one person. Right now, perhaps some of us arguably are two people or three people, not in a schizophrenic sense or whatever that word is, but there's a part of you from the past that is not healed. And you need to figure out what that looks like. How do we move forward? I invite you to this time. We're going to talk through it in detail. This is more my introduction, but this may end up being several parts depending on how long I go. But this is where we meet ourselves. This is where we pull the chairs close. This is where we say, no one has to shout to be acknowledged in this room. This is a quiet meeting. Every word is going to be respected. Everything is going to be spoken. This is not a battlefield. This is a safe place. No one's going to burn the house down. You can walk in, you can sit, you can kneel, you can cry. Nobody's going to be mocked for your shame or your innocence. And in these moments, this is where we can say, I want my real identity and my reunification to return. I'm tired of the cliches. I'm tired of the slogans about healing. I don't want to wear a costume anymore. I don't want a new costume. I want my real self back. This is your homecoming. This is how you become you. There's a part of you that was exiled and sent away. There's a part of you that was dumbed down, and this is where your intelligence comes in and says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the hard work and the heart work. Your sorrow in many ways, and mine for sure, has felt like a flood or a tsunami. And this is where we push the water back. We build those walls so that the water can recede. And if there's another storm, it won't be as bad. This is where you think through what really matters in life from this point forward. This is where you think through what was stolen from you, taken from you without your consent. This is where you look at what was precious to you as a child, and you let the pain hit in waves and just ache. Not because you want to sit in it on purpose and ache, but because in that ache, you can come to a peace and a sense of acknowledgement of what really happened. We're not here to just collapse. We're not here to, oh, this was horrible, and just collapse into it. We're here to reveal it, to reveal the secrets. When you bring secrets into the light, they lose their power. I want to be a human being who does not just live as a collection of reflexes, of emergencies to deal with. I want to be a real person again. I've got so many beautiful memories. I've got so many ugly memories, but I want to be integrated. I have edges, some of them rough, some of them very smooth, some of them warm, some of them very cold. But I have a nervous system that sort of has different voices speaking. There's a child speaking through all that. There's me trying to speak now, and there's a future me saying, it's going to get better, but we have some work to do. Let's do this so that the future you can arrive in a much healthier state. I want to be the kind of person who can say when I'm older, I made the hard choices. I discerned when discernment was critical. I rested. I refused to stop. I focused on my desires. I focused on what I imagined. I let my imagination and my poetry run free. And I remained in that psychological, emotional hospital room until I was healed. We are going to look at the way that, not just in this presentation, but in many, many presentations over the next few weeks and even months, I'd argue, because this is on my heart so much. We want to look at how we become safe. We want to look at how we collaborate, as it were, not just with the community, but internally with ourselves. How do you collaborate with the old person and the person you want to become? How do you empower yourself? And we want to have a voice inside that is just full of good ideas and solid reasoning. And we also want this to be an area where nothing is forced. We're not looking to force ourselves, heal it, and then you got 1 month to heal, or you're taking too long. No. Healing only happens when that kind of force and pressure leaves the room. Nobody's forcing anybody to heal quickly. No one's being coerced. Let the truth, let the pain, let the memories sit down quietly and stay as long as they want, as quiet as they want. And when we let go of those fears, and when we say, yes, this is actually an issue. I'm in the corner. I'm standing in the corner far too long. We start, if you're like, when you're cold, you kind of shiver up if you don't have a nice jacket or blanket, and you kind of start to sort of uncurl yourself. You get to a place where you're saying, I want to uncurl. I want to be soft again. I want to return to myself, and I want my life to begin again. So that's what we're going to talk about. That was obviously a very long way to introduce what I'm talking about. And I would not be surprised at all if in talking through this, we do take several episodes. I think this is a good place to start, though. I want to start by making the main point that, first and foremost, the current you is stating the obvious here, but the current you is the bridge. The current you is the bridge between your old self and your new self. The current you needs the younger you, and the current you and the younger you need the future you, and vice versa. It's sort of a cycle. But when I was growing up, there was a church that had a very loud bell that would ring at, I forget if it was every hour or a couple times a day. But imagine that you live in a valley where if there was a church like that and it rung the bell, you would absolutely hear it loudly. Everyone does. You can't miss it unless you're in a underground bunker maybe somewhere. But this loud bell, but beautiful, is sounding. In the valley of where you live, it's your mind. There's a bell ringing in your mind, and it's been ringing for a while, and it's been waiting to start this process. Let yourself stand in that sound, in the ringing, as it were, in the room of your mind. Get rid of all the fluff and the hype of this doesn't matter, or I just want to heal quickly, or I just want a few catchphrases and special words to heal. This isn't about catchphrases. This isn't about, did we say something catchy or poetic, and does that, oh, that sounded so nice. It doesn't matter how nice we say it or don't say it. Some of this stuff is literally going to be easier if you just literally find a time to be alone and stare in a mirror for 30 minutes. Look in your eyes, not your whole face, your eyes, eye to eye in the mirror, and say, what are you really thinking? What are you really feeling? I've done that, and it's not easy, and it's not fun. It's hard work. Tell yourself healing is not linear in terms of time. This is like a relationship across time. This is a very long-awaited reunion between the different parts of yourself that have been living far too far apart for too long and not talking to each other. I've said it before about your beliefs don't talk to your worldview, but I think we can add at the same time your own selves, past and present and future, are not talking to each other, and they need to. They're far too apart. They're perhaps, if we're going to keep the poetic expressions going, they're perhaps sitting in a quiet room staring at each other and thinking to themselves, which one of us is going to talk first? But nobody's talking. You're just sitting in a quiet room with all the shadows dominating, and the silence is piercing you. Today is the present. Today is where we're at. We're looking backwards and we're looking forwards, but we're looking backwards at ourselves with compassion. I'm sorry for what you, younger me, has been through. I'm looking forward to the future, saying I'm courageous about where I'm going to go next. Your present self is where the memory and the meaning and the choice are all going to meet, and where the wound and your current self is maybe the witness, and your will to move forward. They're all going to sit down at the table, and they're going to quietly start a very long conversation, not hours long, days, weeks, months, years, potentially. Let's talk about where these things started. What happened there? What did it mean? And what is now possible if we can speak to each other? We're not going to be strangers passing by in the dark anymore. Your younger self has all this raw memory, all these raw materials, those bruises from the early days, your hunger to be seen and acceptable and accepted and loved and part of the club. By the way, I'm sorry for looking at my phone sometimes, but I've got a little girl who was at the doctor at school today, and I think she's going to be fine, but I did get told to stay on call just in case, and I think so far we're good, but I do have to keep an eye on my phone just a little bit, so I'm sorry for looking at that, but if the nurse calls, I'll just pivot. But that was the ember. Your childhood, that was the ember. That was when the fire started. And as you were this little fire starting to blaze, it's like fear became the water and started to sprinkle and put your fire out, and it got its hands around your neck. And we hope that our future has this direction towards healthiness and healing. towards a horizon that's just, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. The sunrises and the sunsets that are yet to come. I can't wait. We want to have a wiser posture. We want to have a voice in the future that's far less afraid of anything, including our own truth. We want to have a life that has learned slowly how to stand up strong and firm, like a strong tree that's got deep roots in the wind and the storm. And we don't want to give in to these wounds anymore. Your current self, though, is where you're at now. You have the responsibility today, the burden, to become somebody who says, I have walked down this hallway, this very dark and scary hallway, and there's a lot of locked rooms. I can't open all these doors. I guess I'll keep walking. And eventually you say, I'm not going to walk past the locked rooms anymore. I'm going to stay there and find the key. I'm going to get this door open. I'm going to listen. I'm going to gather all these thoughts and the past, present, and future. I'm going to choose right. I'm going to repair. And I refuse to abandon the story of my life just because it got difficult. There's a point of your story. If your story were a book, you don't want to say, well, in chapter 3 or 4 or 5, that's where this story got really complicated and difficult. So I put the book down. We will not abandon our story at the point where it got difficult. The younger you that you're sort of looking back to, hopefully with compassion, is still very much alive inside of your nervous system, inside of mine. It is not just dead history. It is your mental memory. It is your body memory. It is your emotional reflexes. It's all of your expectations of danger and of hope. All the attachment patterns that we've sort of begun to touch on. We'll talk a lot more about them soon. But it's your self-talk. The younger version of you is your self-talk that has lingered all this time. I mean, do you ever feel like you can just feel your shoulders tensing up? Or do you feel like your stomach suddenly like turns like, oh, not because you ate something wrong. You ate the hot dog you sure knew shouldn't have eaten. Not like that. Your stomach just hurts. It's like it's tightening up. And your mind hurts. Your head hurts. Your body aches. And we talked recently about how when we were little, we would scan, or when we were Christians, we'd scan the room for who needs to be saved, who needs the gospel. But we'd also scan the room for just, is this a safe place? And I mentioned earlier, sometimes we would get good at scanning the room for adults and their moods. You know, you'd learn how to, you'd learn how to tiptoe and walk on eggshells so you didn't upset the powers that be. But some of that's still there. You still scan the room in a little sense. And you still sort of search the room for the beauty and the delight. And sometimes it hurts to think, I either can't find it or it feels out of reach. There is a voice in our heads that silences itself far too long. A voice that says, be careful, be careful. We've heard that in one way or another inside of our heads for so long. Be careful, be careful. Even if you haven't heard that in real life, that's what our inner life is saying. And I think our adult reactions sometimes can feel so wildly disproportionate. It's because we are living as adults with the feeling that this younger self is controlling our reactions or our thoughts. And I think some of us, maybe you, maybe me, we need to admit that we are a grown body that's dominated by child-sized terror. Child-sized terror might be literally pulling the strings of your life. And the calendar of your birthdays might say you're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And the panic inside you says, no, you're 8 years old. You're still an 8-year-old. Your nervous system is remembering. It's remembering the rooms, remembering the faces, the tones. And it prepared your body and said, brace for impact. This is going to hurt. And even now, there's certain tones of people's voices, certain looks of disapproval that you can hear adult to adult, husband to wife, etc. Maybe a delay. Maybe you text somebody and they delay, and you're thinking, why are they not texting me back? And you don't know. They might be in a meeting where they're not even allowed to have a phone or something. We have no idea, but we perceive that delay means they're not interested in talking to me, or there's an issue. There's so many religious triggers. We see authority figures, and all these old ancient fears just pop right up. Your body, as they say, remembers. Your body remembers. It remembers the old experiences, the old appointments with scary stuff. Sometimes a single glance from somebody, a single glance, feels like it carries the weight of years when it reminds you of something else from the past. And the things that did wound us, when they return like that, these new sensations, they return as ultimately as thoughts, and you re-enter your childhood in a sense. You step back through time, through these invisible doors that felt locked, and you feel the old carpet under your feet, and you think, I'm back. I'm back right where I was before. I go back in my head all the time. I've told the story many times of my dad, spending much of his life screaming at my mom, and for years, every single night, I would get out of bed, sit at the top of the stairs, and cry, and listen to him scream at my mom. This wonderful woman, wonderful, wonderful lady. But you hear that. You hear it's like the old house that you lived in as a child is breathing down your neck. And you become, in that moment, just a little bit, the version of yourself that was younger when you had no information about how to really process this or respond. You had, no language for how to say what's going on. You had certainly far fewer choices. There was no way out but to endure it or adapt. And that's why we want to tell ourselves as we go through some of these discussions, and I can tell just from how slowly I'm going through this, that this will be more than one. I was thinking one session from this topic for an hour and a half. I could probably go on for 8 hours just today. I won't, but just saying, our goal is to start at a place of gentleness. So many of us remember very harsh things, and it's time to say, be supremely kind to yourself. The goal here is not to shame ourselves or to shame our current reactions, to shame our earlier reactions. All we want to do is start by saying this one thing: I want to understand my origin. Where did I come from? And that sort of is a parallel to what we did with our deconstruction of Christianity. For many of us, we started by saying, I just want to understand where this came from. You say it came from God, as it were, out of the sky. But then I learned that there's all these other influences from it. I want to understand, what do we mean when we say this looks like it had Egyptian influence or Babylonian influence or ancient Sumerian influence or whatever, Greco-Roman influence? Tell me how this changed, and I want to see, did it come from somewhere else? In almost the same way, you need to figure out, where did you come from? You came from somewhere else, from your earlier self. Our goal is to understand our origin and to ask, where did all this begin? And we don't want to say, my goal is not to figure out where it began and then crush it or make it disappear. That's not what we're saying. We want to become curious, and there is a little sense of correctiveness that's going to occur as we move through this process, but we're not even trying to go there quickly. Curiosity, you take the corrective part of it and put that to the side for now. We will correct our younger selves' perceptions at some point, but we just want to see this, like this trembling younger logic and rationality that was living inside these storms. And I'm not talking just if you were abused. I mentioned my dad and his abusiveness. He's a very abusive man. Said some horrible things to me, said many more horrible things to my mom. And I'm not talking about that stuff. That may be part of your story. It's certainly part of mine. I'm just talking about all the stuff that made you as a child shrink and hurt and try to become something you're not for the sake of survival. And it just shredded you as kids. And a lot of that, I would argue, is from Christianity, straight from Christianity, straight out of it. And we want to look at those old storms, and certainly current storms too, but look for a minute more at the old storms and say, if there's any part of me that's ignoring that, any part of me that's looking at that with contempt, or saying, you just buck up and get through it. That happened 30 years ago. Why are you still dwelling on it? Stop beating yourself up for it. If you have unhealed wounds, then you have unhealed wounds. Approach it with warmth and tenderness. Be kind to yourself today. Be kind to your old self. There is a persona, a self that as a child you built to survive, right? That persona is like the face that we build to adapt to the world around us, to our parents, to our friends, to our church, our social world. And that is a very useful thing. We all have it, but it is very costly and unfortunate when we sort of mistake that persona, that mask, for our whole person. That's not you. That mask is a little part of you, but in many ways, it's probably, arguably for a lot of us, wasn't even the real us. It was like perhaps the opposite of the real us. And I've talked a little bit about that with worldview versus belief. But it was your armor. Is armor useful sometimes? Of course. Armor is very useful in a battle. I'm not saying there's never a time for it. When the arrows are flying, you want some armor. But when you think, I rehearsed my smiles, I smiled because I had to. And I was a frightened child. But if I did the right thing and shut up the right way or whatever, did jump through the hoops, then I can buy myself, as a little 5-year-old, 8-year-old, I can buy myself another hour of peace before someone screams at me or spanks me or whatever. These are costly masks, because that mask, in a sense, became louder than the real you, the real spirit, the real soul that was in you. And your style was really just dominated by survival, fight or flight. I have to survive this. I have to survive God's wrath. I have to survive the angels and demons. I have to survive the rapture. I have to survive my dad beating the shit out of me. I have to survive all this stuff. I have to survive the question of my parents fight so much they're going to get divorced. I have to survive the fact that God says you are a Christian if you believe in Jesus, but if you sin too much, maybe you weren't saved in the first place. So maybe you are actually still on the way to hell. So many attacks from so many angles. And that style of what you think is your style, that's really just your survival, that becomes like your identity. You can't breathe in that very well. You can't. Who did you become, in a fake sense? Who did you become to stay loved? Who did you become to stay safe, or to be admired, and to stay unpunished, to avoid the spankings and the screaming? Who did you become to keep the temperature in the room from rising, from changing? Who did you become so that nobody would accuse you of being sinful or difficult or selfish or rebellious or needy or too much or excessive, or whatever the word of the day was for you in your home or church? Who did you become when life just felt dangerous? If you have ever said to yourself, I was known as a good child, or I was known as the mature one, I was known as the strong one, I was the funny one, I was the spiritual one, I was the pure one, I was the smart one, I was the helper. Spend some time. Ask yourself, what did they say? I remember for me, they used to say, Tim is spiritually mature beyond his years. I heard that exact phraseology more times than I can. Spiritually mature beyond his years. It's a costume. Be honest with yourself. That was a costume you created to survive, because if you got in that club of being the good one and the mature one, you would avoid some of the punishment that was coming for the more worldly, or perceived to be worldly, ones. It was a mask. And all these little identities, they got so much applause. And in a sense, they were proverbially charging rent to you, to your nervous system. It's going to cost you for this facade to stay up. Doesn't mean you were trying to be pretentious and that you were trying to be fake. You may have been truly trying to be spiritual. But that's not normal to impose that garbage on a child. A child should not worry about, am I the good one or the spiritual one? Am I spiritually mature beyond my years? A child should be thinking, do I want to play soccer or baseball today? Do I want to have ham and cheese or peanut butter and jelly? Not, am I the mature one? Am I honoring God, so therefore I can stay on everybody's good side? And well done, little Johnny, my good and faithful servant. Those masks and those roles that we went through, they made it harder for you as a young child to communicate and recognize the true you that was on the inside. And that happened as a child, and it's even harder now when you're looking backwards in time. Those were your instincts coming out, survival instincts. That was your desire to be acceptable and your desire to avoid punishment. But they came at a great cost. the cost of basically saying no to yourself, denying yourself, and your inside may have been screaming, your body may have been screaming. And I've got a presentation. I put it off because I want to think through it a little bit longer, but I've got a presentation coming in a few, at this point, I think a few weeks, but it's just called Give Yourself Permission to Scream. But I know that probably sounds extreme, but I don't think it's going to be as extreme as it sounds when I bring it up. But, your body and your mind had to scream, and yet your outside said, I'm fine. I'm good. There's no mess. There's no mess. Everything's happy. Shiny, happy people. Some of us got praised for the disguise. You realize that, right? Some of you and I may have been spending years of our lives getting praised for wearing a mask. And the more we got praised, the more we thought, this isn't a mask. This is my real persona. This is my real me. The real me, this is my real heart. I love getting this praise. I love being close to God. I love having the pastor think so highly of me. I love my parents saying, you're the only one we can trust. You have such a trust where, even a child is known by his doings, whether his work is pure and whether it is right. God, I haven't memorized that verse in 40 years. I can still remember it. Even a child is known by his works. And you wanted that. You wanted that perception. You were praised for the disguise that was erasing you and putting you in a prison and shielding you from real life and from your own heart. You were praised for being easy to manage as a kid. I obey and I obey quickly. Siblings, they take a minute to obey, or they roll their eyes. Sure, mommy, I'll do it. I'll do it really quick. I'll obey with no talk back. If you don't obey the first time, you don't obey right away, then it's not real obedience. So you be pleasant, you be devout, you be very composed, you be low maintenance, you be selfless, you be strong. You got praised all the way into losing yourself. And it felt so good at the time. And you had no real choice at the time. And now you have to undo all that garbage. What we're looking to identify is what, I'm going to, again, sort of, I think poetic ways of seeing this and metaphors can help. If we, in a sense, say the real you got exiled, then what we're talking about, the work we're looking at is saying, whatever made you go into exile is what we need to undo. Whatever pushed you away, whatever made you go into the dark corner, put your nose against the wall, whatever put the mask on, the costume on, whatever made you think, I get praised because I'm whatever, ultra compliant. It exiled you, and that's whatever pushed you there is exactly the point where we are going to work. Before I go on, I was honestly caught up in my notes. There's a few comments, not too many, but I do want to just mention them because I appreciate you all so much, and I'm sorry I didn't mean to ignore them. Janine, great to see you. If you're still here, we are never healed. It's a becoming over and over again. We constantly change. Yeah. Very well said. Hey, great to see you, Persona non grata. I love your handle. Thank you so much for being here. Hello, St. Gerard Magella. Shell is here. Thank you so much, Shell, for joining us. Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look. Yeah, absolutely. So weird how they trained us up in the way we should go, but they couldn't even do it themselves. And when we did grow up to be empathetic, now we're snowflakes. Yeah. You're woke if you say Jesus says to love your neighbor. Like, it's insane. Keith says there is no longer need to outsource grace, forgiveness, love, and power because we have them inside us already. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Very well said. So again, I'm going to go through some of what I wanted to share, but I think I'm going through it slower than I thought, and that's a good thing. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy that we're going to linger through this stuff. I don't want to go through it fast. That would be a disappointment to me if I tried to focus on wrapping this up as fast as I could. That's not healthy for this kind of topic. So I hope you'll bear with me as I probably stretch this out into 2 or 3 or more sessions. But meeting your old self and having a conversation of sorts or preparing for the future self is more than worth the work. I think a lot of times some of us go through this and we think through the idea of looking back to our old childhood self And this, just all this kind of process is just so dark. So dark, especially if you have an actual memory of like an assault or something, or just a hyper abusive, like long-term hyper abusive context, even if it's not, one specific thing happened to me and it was horrible. Just like a general context of abuse. That's more my context of just endless screaming, endless beatings. But whatever it is, we feel like it's so dark. It's so dark. We don't need to just dwell on it. And that, granted, we don't want to dwell on it in one sense, but we want to give it enough time to show its true colors as to what happened. We don't want it to wait anymore for the chance to talk to us. Where do I go? So many things I want to say about these topics. When our life began to awake inside of us to the point where we felt like perhaps we could grab a little bit more of life and be ourselves, long before we dealt with the healing of the old self. But when we began to see, like maybe at the time of your deconversion, this happened or something else, but you start to see more color. You let your appetite go. Your go in the sense, a good sense, like let your appetite have a party. You become more sharp. There's a fire inside you that grows, the tenderness. And maybe at times you were suspicious of it, but you also are enjoying the newfound you. Maybe it was part of your anger that you let out. Maybe it was your sexual energy. Maybe you became more assertive. Whatever it was, certainly a lot of us became more skeptical as we went through deconstruction. Perhaps you became more playful with life. Maybe you just spoke up more. Maybe you were always quiet, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm not an introvert anymore. I don't know what happened, but I'm not shy anymore. You have learned to stop editing yourself, in a sense, in the present day. You have stopped trying to pretend. You're no longer thinking, is this acceptable? You're saying stuff like, I don't really care what you think about me. And that's not ugly. And you shouldn't undo that. You shouldn't go back to the censorship. You shouldn't try to, just like you were doing things out of survival mode as a kid, you shouldn't go back to that mode now, for sure. But I think what we can do is use our current day as a starting point and say, what is happening to me now that I can apply to my old self? And say, somewhere in your current self, you said, I want to be connected. I want to be deep. I want to be in my own power. I want to have my own authority. I want my autonomy to speak up when it needs to. And it's like you've been wearing a gag. You've been wearing a mask, something that's kept you from talking and even breathing. And what we're going to deal with is say, what is the mask? Again, we said before, we're going to, what made you exile as a kid, but what is currently on your face that's saying, you need to shut up. You need to be gagged. We do it to ourselves. But what is the song inside your head and your heart that's trying to get out? But in a sense, you could say, I'm singing a song, but I don't know how I learned it. And I don't know, was I singing it back then? And I forgot about it? But you begin to feel like maybe there's a part of you that really has been singing a song and you forgot about it. I want to breathe deeper without this gag in my face. I want to listen better. I want to figure out how to have a more conscious, intentional, present, connected life. I want to be integrated. That's the goal. I'm not trying to indulge myself. I'm not trying to say I want the biggest voice in the room. I want to go out and have a sexual experience. I want to just rage whenever I feel like it. We're not trying to exaggerate every possible way that we can heal. What we're trying to do is say, I'm different parts and I want to be integrated. If I'm the kind of person that said anger is always wrong, the wrath of God does not bring about the righteousness of God, that's always been my driving force. And now that I'm deconverted, I still think of anger as bad. If that's what you're saying, then maybe it's time to say, rage, you may enter the room. Whatever the emotion is, the anger comes in, and you're not handing it the keys. You're not saying, dominate me from this point on. You're just saying, I want to be integrated. I want to be one person. Whatever was exiled, I want to say, come on back in. Come on back in. Come in the conversation. Let's talk. Let's talk calmly. Let's talk quietly. Let's figure this out. But none of my old emotions, none of my personality quirks, Nothing is off the table. All of you come together in one big room at one big conference table. Well, yes, there will be pizza and soda. We'll be here for a while. It's integration is like an art. It's an art of letting what was exiled come back under very wise, supervised care of you, your current self, saying, let's calm it, pardon my expression, let's calm it the fuck down. Some of you think you need to dominate, rage you need to dominate, sexuality needs to dominate. No one's dominating now. We're all just going to quietly talk about what happened so far. You want to have steady hands, but you also want to have a vision, big, wide open sky. Where do we go from here? I think one of the things that we want to start with in this is the idea of projection. We have, in a sense, this buried self, this, you could kind of say, is like been leaking sideways. When we project, we are sort of attributing all the qualities that we perceive as unwanted about ourselves and our feelings. We're sort of doing it to someone else. It's like we become ventriloquists in a sense. Our disowned self is sort of throwing our voice into someone else so we can react to it, right? We can react to that person out there instead of recognizing it inside of us. It's what happens in us when this exile happens and we turned at some point in this bizarre process of our childhood to our current self to being okay with being very accusatory out in an outward sense. We demonize in other people the things that we arguably fear or deny. I mean, sometimes, you remember the pastor would always say, when I point a finger at you, I'm pointing 3 or 4 back at myself. And, there was like a fake humility, I guess, and all that, but it's a truism. And sometimes when you say, the whole concept of doth I protest too much? Yeah, you're protesting a little too much. It sounds like you're saying, no, I never did that, but you've said it like 300 times. You could have said it once or twice. The fact you said it 300 times probably means you might actually be hiding something. When we have forbidden something inside of us, it can feel unbearable when it walks in the room toward this in someone else's life. When someone else's face comes up and says, I have a lot of freedom. I enjoy a lot of freedom in life. Or I let my anger go. I have a lot of hunger. I'm very sexual. I let my sexuality dominate. I'm very confident. I speak up. I'm bold as a lion. Or I'm really needy. I'm so needy. It can irritate us and frustrate us and make us sort of bristle against that ache. And we feel maybe mature because I'm not like that. Some of these are not minor details in our lives. It's like their fingerprints, some of their mirrors with their fingerprints all over them. I mean, how many of us have ever said that person is so prideful? That person is so arrogant. Man, I hate that. I hate they're such a pompous asshole. And even as you're saying it in your head, you are like starving for dignity. You're just starving for it. What we called in them, this arrogance, is our wound. And it's like we've got this shape in our minds of, I want some self-respect and I don't have it. So how do I deal with the fact that I don't have any self-respect left because I've been gutted for so long? But you can't face it in yourself, so you attack someone else. We don't know how to admit our hunger. We do not know how to admit our hunger. We have such a hunger for so many basic things that are so healthy. And because we pushed them away and exiled them, we don't know how to face them without so much pain. So we attack everyone else and it makes us feel better. So we can stop dealing with this. Do you ever think about somebody that's selfish? Somebody like, man, you're such a selfish prick. And yet, as we say that, as the words come out of our mouth, the thought crosses our minds, that person is so selfish. If you were to look at yourself for real, sorry, I should be checking my phone just to make sure that the school teacher isn't, or the school nurse isn't calling. No, we're good. Even as we're looking at someone else and saying, you're so selfish. If you're honest with yourself, you'd say, I am chronically abandoning my own needs, chronically abandoning myself. And when you do that, when you erase yourself for so long, what happens is you resent yourself. You've had all this time to sort of have the Christian worldview, and maybe perhaps people, parents, whatever, gut you and hurt you, and you've had to dissolve and disappear all this time. And you resent that process. You resent it so much. And you have to aim your resentment somewhere. So you look for a target. You look for a target, and that's your way of looking for some kind of truth. And you're triggered by somebody else because a part of you aches for what they've done. How many pastors do we know that would scream on a Sunday morning, adultery is a sin, adultery is wrong, this and that, and pornography is wrong? They just have at it, pound that pulpit. Purity, 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 purity. Then you find out they've been with their secretary for years sometimes. And you think you really did protest too much. But because they led the double life, it unfortunately hurt them a lot more, became, a true true wound to everything, to their lives, to their marriage. And that's really sad. But when someone else lives in an unashamed way, where they pursue something that you secretly think you need, that exposes the bars of the jail cell that you're in. You may think that's your home. You may think it's good. It's okay. You're in a jail cell. Whatever we say, I do not welcome this. Whatever you say that about, I don't welcome that within yourself. I don't welcome selfishness. I don't welcome sexuality. I don't welcome pride. Whatever you reject in yourself, it comes back in blazing colors when someone else does it. It really does. And the reaction can be so fierce that we have. And we hate it. And it's so weird. But what we hate in other people is often exactly what we're craving. And that recognition, when the recognition gets that close, it's like your spirit and your heart and your mind, your soul, it knows you have unfinished business. And you try to ignore it and push it away and pretend. Try to pretend. And when it gets close, there's a party that says, be honest. This is where your unfinished business is. You have such an incredible way. I have such an incredible way of lying to ourselves, don't we? Your ego might say, oh, that's annoying. That's disgusting. I'm morally concerned about that. Oh, that's wise. That's foolish. Anything that alerts you and sort of others, that I'm on the one side, they're on the other side. Look at that as potential red flags of the unfinished business inside your heart. It takes a lot of work to be really honest with this stuff. It really does. That inner critic that we're talking about is your internalized form of protecting yourself. It is your internalized protector. This is where we can start to soften ourselves a little bit in terms of how we see ourselves in these whole conversations with ourselves, as it were, because you're moving from all this accusation to start to say, I want to understand. I want to stop the attacks and stop the accusations. I'm just here to listen and understand. That critic inside your head can be very, very cruel. But it is a survival strategy. As so much of what we're talking about is Christianity is a survival strategy, for that matter. But your inner critic can be very cruel. It can be terrified. In a sense, your critic learned that if I hurt you first, if I put the first wound on you, then when the world wounds you later, it might not hurt as much because I've already hurt you a little bit. And so it's monitoring you, it's scolding you, it's predicting where things are going to go south, it's restraining you. Because once upon a time when you were a kid, these mistakes carried such consequences, especially the physical ones where you're like, I hate being chased around the house, seeing that big, thick wooden spoon, pants get pulled down, bare bottom, swat after swat after swat. Your butt's so red for so long you can't sit down for a day or two. It hurts so much. You've cried so many tears. Your face is full of redness from the tears as a child. And you knew that any mistake would carry consequences that are far too deep for any child to bear. No child should have to have that. And your critic inside you learned that if you attacked yourself first, maybe you could avoid the hits of the world. It was like this preemptive shame that you went through. This preemptive shame, and it turned into a shield. It definitely at least tried to. And it's like, if I can reject myself in some way, that transaction might actually work to purchase some safety. If I reject myself, I will purchase a little bit of safety. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But when it worked, it reinforced it and said, yep, we're buying some safety here. Your little mind didn't know much in this world, but it knew how to manipulate the adults enough that if you jumped through certain hoops, you could avoid the punishment. And so you became harder on yourself. And that was somehow your way of bargaining with all this danger. You policed yourself, which we've talked about so much in the last few months. You policed yourself. You became your prison guard because you knew that if you were not perfect, which comes up so much in Christianity, the OCD, the perfectionism, the hypervigilance, imperfection became so dangerous, both in terms of the actual literal spanking, but even just the generic spanking from God, as it were. And the exposure of anything bad, it hurts so much. And being spontaneous, maybe, it backfired on you. You were honest too much one time, and it hurt. And somewhere in your mind, it was like there was these eyes watching and these voices judging, and the conditions began tightening, and your psyche built a guard. It built a really, really well-designed guard. But my friends, and I say this to myself as well, my friends and me, myself, Tim, if that psyche was a prison guard that kept you from the pain of this world early in life, that prison guard has not received the memo that the emergency has stopped. The emergency has changed. And this is where we go through this stuff, because this is where it becomes, useful to us, because we're trying to frame our mind as we have these protective and wounded parts of us. And if we're going to heal, we have to have a relationship with ourselves. We have to be integrated. This is led, in a sense, by all of us together as a community. It's certainly led between you and your privacy of your conversations with your therapist, but it's also really led by you. Like, you have to do this. No one else can lead you to this, but you have to lead yourself through these parts of yourself and say, the war is over. The war against myself is over. My inner world has been a courtroom. Admit it. You have been the judge, jury, and executioner, and police, and the guard. You have been full of these frightened strategies deep inside, all these buried exiles, all these fierce protectors. And you wanted the possibility for all these years of having a calm center, a centered you that has peace. And you wanted so much to not be swallowed up by the darkness. And the new you that's going to come out of this, if you can walk through it, the new you is going to have to learn you've been a bully, but you don't have to be a bully to yourself anymore. You've been panicking, and you don't have to panic anymore. It's like the current self has to say, I see how you started here. I see the beginning of the story. I see how this formed. I see where this came about. I see what you were trying to prevent. I see the pain that you did go through, and I see that you were trying to prevent more of it. You have been trying to run a mansion's worth of things. You've been, if you ever watch The Sound of Music, you remember when Fräulein Maria goes to that house and it's full of rooms and full of kids. Here you are, you're trying to run this huge mansion with all these kids, as it were, running around. So overwhelming. You don't have to run the whole house anymore. There's a voice inside you that has been shaming you for years. You and I are like You know, a little yappy dog. Imagine that dog thinks of itself as a guard dog. And it's like we have this terrified guard dog that mistakenly thinks the house is on fire. And that's the voice that's deep inside that's shaming you, just yapping away, still barking at the footsteps, still pacing the hallway at night. And some of us, it's so bad, you almost can't distinguish from those bad memories and from the current day. Past tense and present tense is the same tense to you on a psychological level. And you are still loyal to that emergency in the saddest way, as am I. We're still trying to save our lives with all these methods that wounded us for so long, and we still keep doing it because we just can't see it. We're still trying to fix that with the wounds as the tools. We love ourselves, but the wounds that we are giving ourselves, that we gave ourselves back then and we still give ourselves, is like a hatred. So we have this love-hate relationship. We attack ourselves so deeply. And I want to say, this is where, again, I feel like everything I'm like, so this is how we start. And I've already started. This is how we start the next part. This is how we start the next part. But I mean, in some ways, this is where I start. I think this is like the biggest part. Talk to your younger self like your younger self is worth protecting. Speak kindly to yourself. Be kind to yourself. This could be the centerpiece, like these talks, these self-talks, not my talk with you on YouTube, your talk with yourself could be the centerpiece of the rest of your life. It could be the pivot, the very small hinge on which the rest of your life changes for the better. Because this isn't theory. We're not talking about, oh, theoretically we could. This is where you literally talk to yourself. It's not theory anymore. This is the room getting quiet. This is where healing is not about contempt anymore or about snarkiness. Sometimes I think some of us just flat out get snarky and contemptuous and make jokes about healing, at least in our minds. This is where we stop doing that. We stop showing contempt and we say, I want an encounter. I want an encounter where all of my parts are integrated together. And so I would say, if you're going to talk kindly to yourself, say in a sense to yourself, ask yourself, what did you, my younger self, need to hear and you never heard? What did you need to hear and you never heard? And some of you probably could say, if I have the chance to really open up and be honest, there's a lot on that list. What did you need to hear and never heard? And perhaps what did you hear that you did hear and you wish you hadn't heard that you need to take back? I've shared with you all, a few times recently. I had that experience with my dad where he said, "Tim, I wish you'd never been born. I wish I could unhear that." And because of his mental health issues later, he just couldn't remember it. So he never even had a chance to say sorry because he couldn't remember any of those conversations. What sentences from your parents or your siblings or even your pastor, your friends, anybody, even the sentence you could have said to yourself, what would have changed the mood and the dynamics and the temperature of your childhood? What would have loosened the knots in your chest as a kid? What would have made you feel less alone and your body feel safer? You feel safer in your own skin. And what were the burdens that you carried when you were younger that you shouldn't have had to carry? I carried the burden for years, and this is not in any way to blame my mom. My mom is lovely beyond words, and I love her so much. I'm so grateful that she's still with us. But, I carried the burden for years as a child of I have to be her sounding board. And we would take long walks, just her and me. We had a special bond because I was born on her birthday. We were the only two left-handers in the house. Whenever we played games and we were on the same team, we'd always win. It was just like mentally we would sync up. We loved the same things. We both took French for years and years and years in college. And it was like we were on the same team mentally, psychologically. And so when she got wounded, it wounded me. And I hated that so much. And we would spend hours and hours and hours and hours sometimes walking around the neighborhood, just her and me, block after block. We've been out for an hour. Shall we walk back? No, Mom, let's go this way. Just another 10 minutes. 10 minutes turns into 45. For years. Again, not my mom's fault, but it was a burden. It was a burden I carried when I was younger. It was not mine. Maybe you did too. Your parents' marriage, the mood of the house, the abuse that was there, just the weather of your home. What was it like? The impossible demands to be good or mature or selfless or spiritual or silent. Just that general burden. How do I make the adults comfortable around me? Or at least how do I keep them from hurting me? And that was all done at the expense of you becoming you. You couldn't live your real life. And that's one of the many reasons I hate that I've just gone through a divorce and a custody battle. I know this stuff transfers, and I hate it. My whole heart. What emotions did you have as a kid that were forbidden? Were there tears that you can think back on and think, I sort of had tears, but they got interrupted. It got cut short in some sense in my life. Your anger, again, was it condemned? Even ironically, some groups talk about joy as if it's a dangerous thing. We just had an interview last night with Ricky Johnson. He said in his denomination, they literally warn people about being too joyful because that was like frivolity and like, ha, 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 just like joking your way through life. The things of the Lord are serious. You know, why so serious? Do it. Be serious about the things of the Lord. And so joy was a danger. And again, we've talked a lot about your curiosity about life, about sexuality, certainly about the Bible and canonicity and church history and mythology. Your desires. You know, was there a magazine you looked at as a kid and you thought, man, gosh, I hope no one knows I looked at that magazine. Just want to blush and hide away. Was there a role that you were assigned, sort of that you shouldn't have been as a kid? You know, were you the peacemaker? Were you the golden child? I'm sure some of you were. You were maybe the caretaker. You were the mascot. Little theologian. That was me. You were the responsible one. Again, the strong one, the invisible one. And all the time, all these kinds of kids, they're all learning. I will scan the room and figure out what I have to do to wear the right mask and the right costume and jump through the right hoops to be safe. And so you have to tell yourself, and you have to say things that you let these kind of words that I'm about to say, you have to let them fall on you slowly, gently. I mean, like when your child has, you know, a fever or something, you might put a really gentle cloth, you know, on their forehead, or if they have, you know, oh, Daddy, I've got a little piece of dust in my eye. You get them a nice warm washcloth and just gently put it on them. Be gentle with yourself. Be simple. You got to say stuff like this. You were just a child. And it's not your fault. There's a movie that I love, Good Will Hunting. Of course, when it came out, I wasn't really allowed to see it because, you know, they say the F word about 5,000 times. And I haven't seen the whole thing in years, but I remember a scene, and I'll never, ever forget it. Robin Williams is talking to Matt Damon. And he's doing exactly what we're talking about. And he's talking about the fact that Matt Damon had gone through a horrible experience, you know, growing up. I think it was his parents' divorce, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. I might be mistaken. I'm sorry if I am, but it won't mess up the point of this. At some point, Robin Williams, being a teacher, I think, but also a therapist of sorts, at least, you know, aware of what was going on here, he goes up to Matt Damon and says, hey, it's not your fault. And Matt Damon just, the first time, was like, I know. And you know where I'm going with this. That's going to make me cry. Robin Williams gets right in his face. And he says it again and again. No. It's not your fault. I know. No, it's not your fault. I know. And he keeps saying it to him over and over. Probably 3-4 dozen times. It's not your fault. Matt Damon gets upset. He's like, his character's like, what, are you fucking with me? Enough. I heard it. I know. And he keeps saying it, risking that Matt Damon might punch him or something. It's not your fault. You were a child. And you were told basically to hold the sky up with your little masks. It wasn't your job. You shouldn't have had to manage these storms. There was grown-up grief around you, and it should have stayed the grown-up's responsibility and issues, and you had to wear all that stuff for years. You had to carry it. You were small. You were learning. You deserved shelter. None of it should have been on your to-do list. None of it should have been assigned to you. And you were adapting to all of it. And you were not failing. And those storms were so harsh. And the wind blew and it bent your psyche and it pushed you around. And you learned how to deal with it because you had to. The room demanded it. You survived with whatever you could do, with whatever tools you could find. You need to tell yourself a couple things here. And I'll probably wrap up after this for today. You need to tell yourself a couple things at that point. Again, repeat, it's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. You were just a kid. They had no right telling you were going to burn in hell. They had no right calling you wicked and a sinner. They had no right condemning you across the board and saying your heart is deceitful. Do not lean on your own understanding. But you need to look at your little kid self, the little kid that's in the corner crying. And you need to say to yourself, self, you already told me that this was too much to bear. Self, you already told me that the weight of the world was my shoulders. You already told me that it's not my fault. And I did not believe you. I gaslit you like crazy. It's time to look at your childhood self who has already been saying this stuff to you and say, I was wrong. I believe you. I believe you. You have a buried life. And we talk all the time as Christians about resurrection. This is about as close as you're going to get to resurrection. This is it. You want to put new breath into an old buried life? Tell your nervous system, tell your younger self that it can testify. It can tell the truth, that it is not alone, and it can say, for goodness sake, you do not have to audition for acceptance and love anymore, starting today. No more auditions. No more jumping through hoops. You do not have to sparkle. Excuse me. You do not have to sparkle. You don't have to soothe anybody. You don't have to achieve anything. You don't have to have trophies. You don't have to comply. You don't have to perform. You don't have to disappear. You don't have to impress me. You don't have to rescue yourself or anybody else. You don't have to stay easy. You deserved tenderness. You deserved calm. You deserved peace. You do not have to earn, you should not have had to earn what should have been given freely every day of your childhood life. So to mimic the Christianese, if I can, come as you are. With all the mess, with all the ache and the heartache and the headaches, with all the unfinishedness, with all of your desire to be worthy of being held and accepted. It's time for your inner benediction. It's time for you to bless and keep yourself. It's time for you to sort of anoint those places that just got dominated by judgment. It's time for you to say, I will go back to my childhood self. I will face what happened straight on. I will say to you, I gaslit you. I'm sorry. I believe you. I believe your stories. I believe it hurt. I believe it was too much. And also, it was not your fault. We have gone through about a third of what I was hoping to get through. I am so glad that I decided to not go quickly. This stuff is deep and arguably, it probably should go even slower. I would say at least 2 more parts of this would be due, maybe 3, maybe 4. We'll see. But what we did here is we started with one simple statement. The current you needs the younger you, needs the future you. And we've focused obviously mostly on the current you needs the younger you. We'll get into the future you a little bit more. But for those of you who can look at this and say, I relate. You're preaching to the choir, man. I know this stuff. This is real to me. This is not theoretical. This is not like, oh, I hope I get more trauma informed so I can speak better to these topics. Like, you're talking to the little kid me. We're in the same boat. For anyone that would say it at that level, I'll just say, of course, number one, I'm sorry for the pain. Sorry for what you've been through. And also to say, I invite you to understand how this stuff happens, to understand concepts of projection and transference and how we have disowned our pain and how that's leaking into our present relationships and our present self-talk, and how we're going to find a way to find safety and trust and empowerment and autonomy and healing, and how you and I can at least try for the first time perhaps in our lives to have unconditional positive thoughts and unconditional positive love toward our younger selves and to our current self. I will stop attacking me. Number one, by getting rid of the garbage theology. Number two, by admitting I have gaslit myself for years and not dealt with the pain. I will listen to my younger self thoroughly. We could probably say it a million times, but I'll wrap up with this. I think it's a great place to start and end. Be kind to yourself. Speak gently to yourself. You deserve it. From everything from Christianity's damage to perhaps your parents' damage, to perhaps your siblings, to perhaps your church, your school, whatever, your neighbor, anything, even just your self-talk. So much has hurt you as a child, and it is pulling the levers of your life right now, whether you know it or not. Be kind to yourself. A few last comments, and then we'll go. See here. Oh, I missed quite a few. I'm sorry. Let's see here. Steven says, I'm here. Was watching Brandon's response video. Okay. Hey, there's a lot of YouTubers. If you got somebody else to go to, and no judgment here. Anyone can always watch the replay, and I appreciate people watching live or replays for sure. Dark God 6, how's it going, Tim? Good to see you. Thank you so much. Going okay, hanging in there. Quad Iron Gaming, thank you so much for being here. Very, very good to see you all. Steven says, true. Shadow work is difficult, but essential to really be honest with yourself. Scary at times, but once you've done it, you come back out with a better understanding. Yeah, absolutely. Getting beaten up as a child and being told that they were hitting the devil out of me. Yeah, that's insane. And I didn't quite have that verbiage, but it wasn't far from that. I'm still angry at my parents for doing that. Yeah. Yeah, it's some of that's so painful when it's wrapped up not just with the words, with the physical beatings. I have endless memories of that. Shannon says, in my final years working as a nurse, my mantras were, don't panic, and dang, I'm sorry that, whoops, don't panic, and not everything is an emergency. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Good words. Yep, Stephen, for sure. I'm very sorry for that story about being told they were getting the devil beaten out of them. Susanna from Scotland, representing the UK. Great to see you here. I'm here. Thank you, Tim. You're exposing so much to help us heal. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Stephen says, that's a long story. Maybe someday we can chat about that. My voice not being heard, therefore any abuse being reported and brought to account. Yeah, I'm a survivor. Sorry, I was thinking those were connected. Those are two different. I'm going to read Susanna's, and I'll come back to her, Stephen. My voice not being heard, therefore any abuse being reported and brought to account. I remember being sent that clip from a close friend, and it made me feel and be able to not fully blame myself. Ari, Robin, and Matt. Yeah. That clip from Good Will Hunting. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a survivor as well. Robin Williams did a lot of good stuff to help us see inside of our hearts. I wish his outcome had been a little better, but we can definitely try to take lessons from that, from his life, and certainly from his kind words in that movie. Well, I will be in an interview tonight. If anyone can join, that is currently set, if we don't make any last minute changes, to 5 o'clock Eastern, so a few hours away. And if that goes long, I probably will wrap it up then. But if it goes shorter, meaning like an hour, 15, hour and a half, if Philip and I are done that interview, which will be live streamed, you can come on and ask your questions if you want or make comments. I'd love to have you. But if it gets shorter, it's not too long, I may jump back on. I'll make a last minute decision about how that's going. I'll kind of have the link ready, and I'll just pop it into. I'll probably take a presentation or a live stream call I'm going to do another night. Let's push it to tonight and flip a switch. So I may jump back on. So keep an eye out. If not, no worries. We'll be back on soon. But I love you all. Appreciate you all. Thank you for being a part of my healing journey, and thank you all for letting me share what's on my heart. It means the world to me. I do hope some of it is helpful to you. Appreciate your feedback, and we will pick up more of this soon. I hope it's a good series. It won't be that long of a series, but a lot of the topics that we weave into it will absolutely be weaving into other topics just from different angles. So if you're like, oh man, I thought this could be easily like a 10-parter, we'll do it in 3 or 4 parts. But a lot of the parts that you might think could have been still to come, they're going to come right up in the next topics. We'll attack it from different angles, and with hopefully a lot of creativity. So thank you all so much. I love you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.